Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. Ukraine says new talks with the United States and Russia begin in Abu Dhabi on Wednesday. President Zelensky says Kyiv is ready for substantive discussions to end the war. Meanwhile, a Russian strike hits a maternity hospital in Zaporozhye, Ukraine. At least 6 people are wounded, according to regional officials. Iran's supreme leader warns a US attack would trigger a regional war. The warning comes amid heavy US military deployments in the Gulf. Iran declares the armies of EU states as terrorist groups after the bloc blacklists the Revolutionary Guards. The move follows Europe's response to Iran's deadliest protest crackdown since 1979. Pakistan says its security forces killed 145 terrorists after coordinated attacks in Balochistan. The officials call it one of the deadliest security flare-ups in years. President Donald Trump says the United States could work out a deal with Cuba. The comments come days after he threatens tariffs on countries supplying Havana with oil. Israel says the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt is reopened for limited passage. Only a restricted number of Gaza residents are allowed to cross. A second woman alleges Jeffrey Epstein sent her to the UK for a sexual encounter with a man formerly known as Prince Andrew. A lawyer says the alleged meeting took place in 2010 at Andrew's residence. We start this hour in the European conflict, and Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, says that US President Donald Trump is an effective leader who is genuinely seeking peace in the war, but that Moscow had seen no trace of nuclear submarines. Trump said he moved to Russian shores last year. Medvedev praised Trump as an effective leader, noting that despite his chaotic style, he's been original and pragmatic in his approach. The Russian official further highlighted that under Trump's leadership, contacts with the US have become much more productive. Medvedev's comments shed light on the evolving dynamics between Russia and the US, particularly regarding diplomatic relations. Let's listen in.
Trump президент Соединенных Штатов Америки. И он прежде всего выбран американским народом. И мы к этому выбору относимся с уважением. Более того, Трамп победил, прямо скажем, в непростой борьбе. Это нужно иметь силу воли и мужество, чтобы сопротивляться системе. Но он фигура сложная, противоречивая. Он, напомню, что все-таки на момент начала своей государственной карьеры вообще не имел государственного опыта. Это такая беспрецедентная история. Тем не менее, он со многими процессами внутренними справился, хотя считается, что американский Deep State все-таки его не принимает. И мне кажется, это на пользу делу. Но завершу я с того же, с чего начал. Он человек, который внедряет совершенно новые способы управления. Вот обратите внимание, это первый президент Соединенных Штатов, который управляет через социальные сети.
This comes as both the United States and Russia wait to attend a further trilateral meeting with Ukraine in Abu Dhabi on the 3rd and 4th of this new month of February in Abu Dhabi. David K. Johnston joins us now, an author and journalist, joining us live from New York. Thank you very much, David. It's always a great pleasure to speak to you here on the program. Why would a senior Russian official like Medvedev there publicly describe Trump as effective and peace-seeking? This is, of course, a narrative that we've heard quite frequently from Russian officials in recent months after Trump's presidency. Why are they pushing this narrative?
Well, I think it's very clear that Medvedev, who is essentially the major domo of Putin and served for 4 years as head of the Russian Federation, but actually it was Putin's puppet in those years, is trying to push along the United States so that they can bring an end to the war while providing Russia with much of what it wants, not completely conquering Ukraine, but certainly keeping the territory that they have acquired with an enormous, unbelievably large butcher bill in terms of dead and injured soldiers, and to try and pressure and push their campaign to get land they haven't conquered militarily. That's been the big holdup in these talks, and it's certainly core to the Russian agenda. And they're trying to manipulate Trump. Donald is very subject, as I've explained to people in the past, he's very subject to the last person he talked to, the idea that's in his head at the moment. And so this seems to be part of the effort to get Trump to put pressure on Ukraine to do what the Russians would like.
And Medvedev claims contacts with the US have become much more productive. What would productive actually mean from Russia's perspective here?
Oh, it would mean that they're getting towards pulling back on the intelligence and war materiel that Ukraine needs to defend itself. And Trump has, of course, been highly inconsistent about this, just as Biden before him took a little inch-by-inch diplomatic approach rather than drawing a red line about the Russian invasion. And with these talks coming up, the U.S. is no doubt going to continue to push what is described in many news reports as the Trump plan, but appears very much to be the Kremlin plan, slightly modified.
And of course, some European countries, Ukrainian allies, have been looking upon this relationship with certain concern, particularly, of course, when Vladimir Putin went to Alaska earlier in 2025. What do you think worries US allies about this warmer relationship that Donald Trump and his administration seems to have with Moscow?
Well, Putin has made it very clear, going back more than a quarter century, that he wants to put back together under the thumb of the Kremlin the territory of the old Soviet Union, and more if he can. The prime ministers in the three Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, tell everybody who will listen, if you don't stop Putin in Ukraine, the Russian tanks are coming. It's just a function of when. And there have been many, many aggressive moves by the Russians, overflights of territory with Russian military jets and other activities. And so the Europeans have not stepped up as much as I would have expected given the threat, although they have spent more money supplying war materiel to the Ukrainians than the United States has. And of course, Putin, who, along with Medvedev, sees the West as this existential threat, even though no move has been made against Russia, they want to break up NATO. That's a core value here, to break up NATO. And Trump has been spouting the Kremlin line on this for years. Donald is clearly, from the point of view of Putin and Medvedev, an asset of the Kremlin. That does not mean he's an agent. That would be witting, deliberate knowledge. But he certainly has been the best investment they have ever made. And the Russians, of course, have been courting Donald Trump since at least 1987.
David K. Johnston, do stay with us as we move on to our next story. We turn to a related development, and on the battlefield, a Russian strike on a maternity hospital in Zaporozhye, Ukraine, has left at least 6 people injured, including 2 women who were being examined at the time. Governor Ivan Fedorov confirmed the attack, sharing a footage of shattered windows and rising smoke from the site on Telegram. This latest assault on civilian infrastructure comes as Russia continues its offensive in the southern region. Despite ongoing peace negotiations between Ukraine, the US and Russia, the incident underscores the ongoing dangers to civilians in conflict zones. Meanwhile, President Trump had announced a suspension of attacks in Kyiv until February the 11th, just ahead of the next cold snap. Next, we turn to West Asia, and tensions between the US and Iran are escalating, with Washington signalling that its patience is not infinite. US Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, says the US President, Donald Trump, is giving Iran some time to step back from potential confrontation, but made it clear the president will not be forever patient. The remarks come as Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, issued a strong warning against any US military action, saying it could spark a regional war. He also addressed recent anti-government protests, calling them akin to a coup, saying protesters attacked police, government offices and religious sites. Khamenei added that the coup was attempted quickly, but quickly suppressed, maintaining government stability. Joining us for this discussion once again is David K. Johnston, and Ali Mohammed Abushbek also joins us. He is a Middle East researcher. He joins us live from Cairo to discuss this. David, I want to come to you first. When Washington says its patience is not infinite, what specifically would trigger a US attack?
Well, if you see attacks, they're going to be air attacks. We're not going to launch a ground war. Iran has 1 million men who are or have been trained for military service. So that's the second is not going to happen. And all of this goes to Donald Trump's belief that he runs the whole world, which he himself has said. He is the all-powerful Donald Trump, and the failure of the American Congress to rein him in, since he has no authority to wage war. He can make defensive attacks if he believes U.S. military or civilian assets are under threat. He can respond immediately, but he's really trying to establish that he is the all-powerful dictator of the United States, and that's at the core of what's going on here. He needs to also distract people as best he can from all of the new things that have come out in the partial release of Epstein files that are very damaging to Trump and his friends. So the bellicosity involving Iran is a part of that, and it's tied up with larger issues. It's really awful for the whole world that we're not trying to have a rapprochement with Tehran. I mean, it is the most sophisticated country in the Middle East, highly educated, close to 100 million people. And the U.S. has just managed with incredible success. In 1954, when it overthrew the elected leader, Mossadegh, I think it was 54. And after the Shah and his vicious reign came to an end, that we have driven the Tehran government away, actually in some ways made them allies of Russia, at least on a transactional basis. It's just, Thomas, it's just a terrible, horrible outcome for the whole world.
Indeed. David, do stay with us. Ali, I want to go to you next. Thank you very much for joining us, first of all. Khamenei has called these protests a coup attempt after we've seen a reported 6,500 people dead now, with other human rights agencies reporting higher. Do you think this is a sign of regime confidence or insecurity?
Thank you, Thomas, for having me. Things is the number is still up to now. It's not confirmed because there is a limitation, and there is a blackout, internet blackout, and there is a limitation for a human rights organization to work inside Tehran. And up to now, there is no confirmation about the exact number of the protesters who got killed. This is the method of Tehran and Iranian regime to accuse anything. I mean, in referred to any protest or anything as a conspiracy, as a United Nations and Mossad, Israeli Mossad, they are using people to create a chaos in Iran. This is a very old method that Iranian regime and Khamenei regime use it against us to make any people or to, make a fear among the people, because there is a strict rule against anyone who's dealing with intelligence service especially the Iranian enemy. So these things, accusing the protester in Iran as a spy, or they are using, applying a foreign agenda against Iran, this is a very old method. And the Iranian proxy in the region, like Hezbollah, like any Houthi and Hamas in Gaza, they use the same method to accuse the protester. But here, the strong or the significant issue is not about the protest or the demand of the people, civilians who are seeking for the, for enhance the economy and enhance the life, social life in Iran. The several things and the crucial things, it's about the rule the rule of Iran in the region, using the proxy against their enemy, like Israel, like America, like everything, and also threatening the Red Sea in the region. That's making Iran in a very embarrassing way, and in very crucial way that Iran is creating several of issues. But
yes,
in my opinion, what's happening Iran now between a rock and a tough place. Either they will go through the negotiation with America, or they will lose they will lose everything. The strong card with it. Hezbollah have been demolished in Iraq, in Lebanon. Also, the Bashar al-Assad regime have been collapsed in Syria. Simultaneously, Hamas, Gaza, it's also deeply impacted and damaged during the war. So Iran now, without any proxy, without anyone to defend, and using its agenda in the region. So Iran now understand the hard lesson, especially after the American military operation in in June 2025, when they are bombing and attacking a nuclear facility. So this is the method also of Donald Trump, pressurizing Iran and pressurizing the enemy under, the military pressure, making them accept anything. Yeah.
Ali, do stay with us, apologies. But David, I just want to come back to you finally. Of course, all of Donald Trump's efforts to create a board of peace to broker a ceasefire in Gaza, Khamenei here says that any US strike would spark a wider war, calling legitimate targets Israel as well as other US bases in the Middle Eastern region. Do you think Washington will accept that risk?
I don't know. Donald is so mercurial. The clear frontal lobe dementia that he's suffering from, that a number of psychiatrists and psychologists have talked about, makes it very hard to tell. Clearly, Trump is not hewing to what he promised voters, particularly his MAGA base. No more military entanglements overseas, no more long wars. We're going to walk away from that, and that's not what he's doing. And he's very subject to what was just said to him by the last person in the room, and he needs, and this is always important to keep in the forefront, he needs to distract people from the Epstein files. So I don't know, but if there's any military action by the US, it's going to be limited to drone strikes, maybe high altitude stealth bomber strikes. It's not going to be a ground assault. Trump has a small number of military ships and an aircraft carrier off the shore of Iran, but he does not have a large contingent of Marines with landing vehicles and tanks and all the other equipment you would need for launching a ground war, which he has no authority to do under the American Constitution. Not that Donald pays any attention to the limits on his presidential authority.
David K. Johnston, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Ali, do stay with us as we move on to another update from West Asia. And Israel says the passage of Palestinians through Gaza's Rafah crossing is expected to only begin on the 2nd of February. Today, the crossing between Gaza and Egypt was reopened for tests and security assessments, but no residents were allowed to pass. A Palestinian delegation, along with dozens of ambulances, entered Gaza from the Egyptian side as part of the preparations. Israel says this limited pilot phase is coordinated with Egypt and the European Union Border Assistance Mission. Full movement of people will start after all security checks are complete. The reopening follows a ceasefire under a US-backed plan to halt the war. However, the crossing will only allow people to pass, not aid, even as humanitarian groups warn that Gaza remains in desperate need of supplies. Ali, why only a partial reopening, and why not a full one as promised in the first phase of the ceasefire?
Thomas, it's worth mentioning that the situation in Gaza, especially the ceasefire between Gaza and Israel, is still fragile, and the situation is volatile. Yesterday, Israel have been killed and more than 30 civilians from Gaza, among them also a policeman in Sheikh Radwan neighborhood. So the thing is about the reopen the border. It's, in my opinion, this is after the pressure from Witkoff and Donald Trump, because it's supposed to be reopened during the first phase of negotiation or the ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel in October 2024. So the things 2025, sorry. So the thing is Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu used to buy the time and delay to reopen it until analysts Hamas return the last death body of the captive in Gaza, but that also today reopening the border and humiliate the civilians, because there is a surveillance from the border, and Egypt should be submit a list for the Israel about the people who's going to move from Gaza, either they are in or out Gaza. More than 150 people who are supposed to leave Gaza and 50 civilians from outside Gaza to have a right to return to Gaza. This is the limitation of number. It's showing how much Israel trying to humiliate civilians in Gaza and trying to treating the civilians in Gaza as an animal. And this is clear. Naftali Bennett, when the Israeli Yoav Gallant, during the first day of the war, he said we are fighting a human animal. So they are treating the civilians in Gaza as a human animal. More than 200,000 civilians in Gaza have been injured during the war in Gaza, and they are waiting for the treatment journey outside Gaza, because there is no doubt about the medical service in Gaza have been damaged and collapsed during the war, and there is at least around 5 only hospitals in the old Gaza Strip. It's working up to now, and there is a shortage in medicine. All of these 200,000 of civilians wait for reopen the border in Gaza to go out for the treatment journey, but give limitation of the civilians. And I guess this is the basic and fundamental human rights about the mobility and the right of mobility to go wherever you want. Israel tried to create a chaos in Gaza, but reopening the border at this time exactly, it's sparked several of a question. Is that America pressurized Israel? That's mean America and Israel disagree in this page about the border in Gaza and about the future of Gaza? Or this is one of the plan that between Israel and America, because they are aligned with these kind of cases in Gaza. But the thing is also the future, the second phase of negotiation of the deal between Hamas and Israel about lie down Hamas, disarm Hamas. And about the reconstruction in Gaza. It's not related only the case of Gaza, it's related to the border, reopening the border or close the border. Because since the past 2 years, Israel have been closed the border between Gaza and Egypt. So the thing is, it's about the huge, challenge facing the second phase of the deal between Hamas and Israel. It's reconstruct Gaza, about the civilians who's waiting for reopening, to reconstruct and find a shelter of themselves. This is a huge challenge, and about the future of the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, because we have seen Egypt deeply past and condemned Israel's attack yesterday, and also Qatar, Turkey, most of the mediator lambast Benjamin Netanyahu's decision to attack Gaza yesterday. Despite that, up to now, it's a silent war in Gaza. It's not like before. So the same things happen in Lebanon. Today they are attacking South Lebanon, and there is yesterday it was one civilians have been killed, and today there is some people injured. So Israel happy with this situation. Neither war nor a peace in all the area, Lebanon, Syria, Gaza. So the thing is, Benjamin Netanyahu is trying flexing his muscle in the Israeli community that despite he failed in Gaza, the aim of the war in Gaza is erase Hamas. Hamas still exists in Gaza and return the captive.
Yes. Ali, apologies. We are running out of time. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. It's always a pleasure to get your insight on these issues. We now turn on to our next story, and 8 people have been killed and 26 others injured in a bus accident in Antalya, a coastal tourist city in southern Turkey. According to the provincial governor, the bus operated by the Buzlu company and travelling on the Tirak-Dag and Tayalaya route hit roadside barriers before plunging into a ravine in the Dosamalaiti district. The passenger bus reportedly overturned after the driver lost control of the steering wheel due to heavy fog and slippery road conditions while approaching a multi-level intersection on the Northern Ring Road in the Komakula neighbourhood of the Dosamalaiti district. Let's take a listen into what the provincial governor had to say.
Bu sabah saat 10:20 sıralarında Antalya Döşemealtı ilçemizde Kömürler Kavşağı bölgesinde virajı alamayarak şarampole yuvarlanıyor ve maalesef 8 vatandaşımızı kaybettik. 26 vatandaşımız.
The French tech company Capgemini has announced it will sell its US subsidiary Capgemini Government Solutions. This move follows pressure from French lawmakers over a contract that was signed with the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. The contract raised concerns after the fatal shooting of 2 US citizens in Minnesota last month. Lawmakers, including Finance Minister Roland Lescure, has urged Capgemini to provide more clarity on the deal. Capgemini has explained that US legal restrictions on federal contracting has made it challenging for the company to exercise full control over certain operations with US ICE agents. For now, the company has started the process of divesting the unit, though it did not specify whether the sale was directly related to the ICE contract. Capgemini Government Solutions accounts for a small portion of Capgemini's overall revenue, both in the US and globally. A significant point to note here is that Capgemini has made it clear that it did not have access to any classified information or technical operations related to the ICE contract. Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.